Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our very first event for 2025. If you don't know me, I'm Sam. I'm one of the organizers of VJug. And whether you're watching this live right now, hi, everyone, or you're catching up later on YouTube, we've got some amazing content for you. Also, I do want you to stick around until the end of the show because we have some specials from DevOps UK, JCon Europe, as well as DevNexus, both free tickets and discount codes. So if you want a free ticket to any of those conferences or want to knock a little bit of money off the price of the ticket, then do stay until the end of the session because we'll be doing live raffles for those tickets. But if you're new here, welcome to VJug. So we're the virtual Java user group, and we're a global Java community bringing together high quality tech talks for wherever you are in the world. If you don't have a local Java user group or you just want some extra content, then this is the place for you. But I'd love to know who all of you are. So I can see we've already got some comments in the chat, but whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, if you want to pop into the chat where you're watching from, we'd love to see how many countries we can get today. So please pop your location and name in the chat. So hi, everyone. But today's session will actually be hosted by Irina. She is a passionate Java specialist, specializing in data-driven decision-making and interdisciplinary research. And she's going to be joined by Anton, a true expert in all things Kotlin, and he'll be diving into Kotlin 2.0 and beyond. If you've got any questions for either of them during this live session, please pop them in the chat and Irina will get them over to Anton. Ask them as and when you want. This is meant to be an interactive session, so if you've got questions, pop them in and we'll get them over to Anton. If you haven't already joined our Slack community, I highly recommend that you do that. And I'm actually going to get the Slack up on the screen. Here we go. So join our Slack. This is where if you're watching this on catch up later, or if you've got any questions post-event, it's the best place to ask those questions. You can also chat to Java developers and developers from all around the world. And if you win any of our tickets to any of the conferences, you will need to redeem them through Slack. So take that URL and join us in Slack and we'll be able to get you those free tickets as well as questions to Anton or any of our past or future speakers and chat to each other. If you'd like to stay connected with us, we are still on X as well as Blue Sky, and you can search for us by looking for Virtual Jug, or you can search Virtual Java User Group on LinkedIn and find us there. And again, as I said, we've got some free tickets and discount codes to DevOps UK, JCon Europe, and DevNexus that you can win at the end of this session. So please, please, please stick around. But I actually think that's probably enough from me. I love to see all the people in the chat. But let's bring up Irina and Anton. And hi, everyone. Welcome to VJug.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Amazing.
Exciting.
Have either of you been to any of those conferences? JCon, DevOps, DevNexus, attended any of those events?
DevNexus, yes. I don't remember I haven't been to JCon myself. And DevOps, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah,
well,
yes,
hopefully
DevOps is a great conference. Yeah.
They're also the ones that help us power VJug, which is really, really cool. And nice to see people from all over the world. We've got people from Colorado, from Bulgaria, from Missouri, from Germany. So hello, even Italy, Ohio, from Portugal. So hello to everyone watching. Really lovely to have you here. I'm going to now hand over to the wonderful Irina to take away the show. But again, pop those questions in the chat and we'll get them over to everyone. But have a great show. I'll see you at the end to give you some free tickets.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam, for that fascinating introduction. I'm very excited to the opportunity to host this event. All right, let's jump right in and please join me in welcoming our speaker today, Anton. He will be sharing insights on Kotlin 2.0 and 2.1 and beyond. Kotlin just turned 14 recently, and it's a relatively young programming language. Anton, you also wrote a foreword in the book Kotlin Design Patterns, where you mentioned that, well, albeit the programming language is still so young, it is built on shoulders of giants, which means that it borrowed a lot of features and best practices, maybe experiences from other programming languages, which is, of course, great because we can share this knowledge and experience in building blocks. And of course, Kotlin is continuously being further developed and optimized. It is great to see the effort in sharing such insights and developments and optimizations with the community, which comes from passionate people in Kotlin community, especially today. So Anton has put efforts in sharing his knowledge, experience, and passion, not only by speaking on conferences, but also in interactive workshops, books, blogs, and media. I don't want to spill the tea, so Anton is here. Let's hear what he has to say. Anton, finally, I let you to take over.
Thank you, Irina, and thank you for the intro. Yeah, we have the slides only presentation today because StreamYard didn't let me share the screen with the ID. But well, this way we're gonna optimize our time here. One of the first questions that might appear in your head, like it's a Java user group, but why do we talk about Kotlin here today? Well, because Kotlin is actually a JVM programming language. It was created as an alternative JVM programming language, meaning the use case is very much the same, running your program, your bytecode on the Java virtual machine. Today, I'm going to talk about what happened with the language in the past few iterations, few years. I will give you a little bit of a historical perspective, a little bit of personal perspective why I like the language, because my background is actually in Java, and well, I've been programming Java since 2001, I think, and I only switched to Kotlin right before COVID, so BC 2019, BC before COVID. Let me start clicking the slides for you. So a little bit of an introduction. So you can find me on X or the former Twitter. As I said, I did a lot of Java, and I switched to Kotlin recently. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. I'm based in Tallinn, so Estonia is also on the list of the countries on the session today. And I do have some hobbies, but we're not gonna dive into those today. If you're following Kotlin YouTube channel, you might have seen me there, or if you have been visiting some conferences, I do speak a lot about developer tooling there. So let's start with a little bit of history because it's Kotlin 2.0 and beyond, and 2.0 kind of refers on something big that happened to Kotlin recently, and we gotta understand how did we get there. So a little bit of historical perspective helps as an introduction. So as it was mentioned, Kotlin is 14 years, but it was just announced 14 years ago, and actually it was announced as a general purpose JVM programming language. The idea was that we borrow some practical features from different languages and release it as a convenient tool for the developers who are let's say too passionate to wait for the new releases in Java, because it was the time when Java was not fast on delivering features. And well, with the recent switch to the 6 months cadence, 6 months release cadence, we can see that it's now flourishing and delivering new stuff faster. But at that time, we were concerned that we want something else from the language. We want a different pace of development, and a lot of JVM languages appeared at that time. So in 2016, actually, we released the first stable version, and last year we released the second version. And well, what took us so long? What took us 8 years to deliver the new version of the language? And actually, meanwhile, we had a lot of releases and a lot of iterations on the language, and a lot of those features were developed ad hoc. Like we came up with some idea, or the community demanded something from us for the special use cases, and we were delivering those features. In fact, in 2019, again, when I joined the team, basically, it's not me who started the project, but the team started the rewrite of the compiler, which is the major feature in Kotlin 2.0. So the language didn't actually change. We rewrote the compiler entirely, and that is why we have the 2.0 major version there, right? It's a big chunk of the tool that has been updated. And well, meanwhile, we managed to release 2.1 as well at the end of the last year, and we are heading towards 2.2, which actually hints us that 2.0 now gave us some tools and possibilities to develop the language a little bit further, like a little bit more predictably. Let's say we get rid of something, and that's something we're gonna reveal in a second. So before we do that, like if you are a Java developer and you haven't tried Kotlin, or you have tried Kotlin, or you're an experienced Kotlin developer, it would be great to see in the chat if what kind of experience do you have with Kotlin? How are you using it? Are you using it for Android development? Are you using it for server-side development? Are you just starting? Are you a seasoned Java developer and just learning about Kotlin? Tell us what experience you have, and it would be great to see. But what I want to talk here, like for a bit today, is the just my subjective view on the features of the language. It's not the exhaustive list, of course, but what makes Kotlin great. And when Kotlin appeared 14 years ago, this picture was an easy sell to Java developers. Like, you showed the data class and the equivalent Java code, and you could say, hey, see, if I write it in one liner and it takes like 50 lines of code in Java. But like today, fast forward 15 years today, Java has records, a slightly different syntax, but pretty much the same amount of lines. You can see very, very similar. We like to think that we have like kind of influence the development of Java, the language, and they look at us, they borrow something from us, we look at them, and we borrow something from them as well. And even now, Java, with the appearance of records, they introduced pattern matching, and Kotlin doesn't have pattern matching as a feature, but it has a combination of other features that combined give you similar experience. We get a look at that as well. But if you go to the documentation for Kotlin, there is a comparison with Java, what Java has and Kotlin doesn't have, and what Kotlin has and Java doesn't have. If you just compare the checkboxes, you will see that there is a huge list of the features that Kotlin has and Java doesn't, and a minor list of the features that Java has and Kotlin doesn't. I don't want to compare side by side, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to compare the checkboxes. It makes sense to see what combination of features combined gives you the experience that you enjoy. And I will just cover a few of those small things, not big things, in a few next slides. So, very simple start, something that Java just introduced as well, the top level main method without the arguments. You can use the local variable type inference and print out something. And there we have string templates. Java tried recently; they had to roll back the feature, the string templates, str dot and then a string, some special template providers. I hope the architects of the language will reiterate and come up with something that the community likes. Here in Kotlin, this feature is slightly less powerful, let's say, but it's very pragmatic. It's very easy to use. Either you can interpolate the strings or even use the expressions for the interpolation. So for instance, here we use the uppercase function to interpolate the value of the event variable. And then we have top level functions. So that's an interesting syntax. You might think, why is there like fun string dot? That's because it's actually an extension function. So you can introduce extensions or additional functions to existing types within some scope. That's very convenient because some of the Java API is not so tailored to be used in Kotlin. You can call Java without problems, but sometimes it's more convenient to adjust the existing Java API to be used with Kotlin via the extension functions. And then actually, well, it might seem like a controversial feature that you add something to an existing type, some new members, but you can follow the discipline. There are best practices that community came up with, and it's actually a very convenient feature in the language. I like it. I like it very much. It changes the way I write code in my Kotlin programs, or that are actually JVM programs. Single expression functions, where you can just, if you have just one statement, you can just say, well, this function equals the expression. This is something that exists in a Java enhancement proposal drafts. It's still on paper, not even in the works, though there is no real number. But as you can see, like basically the feature that exists in Kotlin also inspires the Java development. Type inference. So if we don't want to specify the type, we can infer the type for the return type of the function by looking at the right-hand side of the this equals mark. So whatever is in the expression, whatever the compiler can infer from this expression becomes a return type for the function. Default arguments. So that's a great feature. A very small feature, but a really great one. It dismisses 80% of the cases where you need to overload functions or constructors in Java, and I really like it. So teeny little convenience in the language, but so useful. Named parameters, along with the default values, you can use named parameters, and the two features combined make it a great experience here. Trailing lambda, also a neat feature. When you have a lambda as a parameter, lambda expression as a parameter, you can amend the braces, not write them, and it looks like a keyword. Like there is a transform keyword, almost like where that follows a block of code, but in fact it's a function call, and you pass it a lambda as a parameter. Null safety. It's the single greatest feature in Kotlin, in my opinion, and a lot of people also think like this, where the type system of Kotlin distinguishes between the types that can contain null as a value and cannot. And if the type is declared or variable is declared as a nullable type, the compiler will force you to check if this specific variable is null or not, and it provides you some convenience operators for that as well. So it's not enough to just introduce null safety on the type system level. You also should provide the convenience tools to use that thing. It's not the feature that Kotlin invented, and a lot of other languages actually started adding null safety into their feature set, and Java is looking into that as well. One day, I hope a lot of languages will be as null safe as possible. So there is more, but the whole point of this is not just looking at the checkboxes and saying that, hey, we have this feature. No, it's important how those features compose. How can you take multiple little features in the language and start using them conveniently in a combination for multiple reasons, whether it's readability, convenience of writing code, tooling around it, static checkers, and so on. There is always a price, of course, the compilation speed and all the other issues like supporting the editor. So there's always a trade-off for these things. But if you look at the progression from 1.0, there are some features that seemingly existed like forever in the language, but were actually added after 1.0. So, like coroutines, the way of writing the asynchronous code, or multi-platform projects, or even trailing comma or functional interfaces, they were added after 1.0. And if we proceed further, we will see that there's more and more features that were added after 1.0. So the language was evolving a lot, and well, it accumulated some technical depth because a lot of features were added on top of a prototype that became the production, compiler. So the very first proof of concept that the team developed, just to check the idea, and they actually started very quickly. They mm, were able to develop the first version of the compiler that was actually producing the valid bytecode in the beginning very quickly. So they couldn't stop. They started adding more and more features on top of this, and therefore it piled up and accumulated a lot of technical depth. And at some point, it was just inevitable to stop to stop somewhere and reiterate, can we do something better? Because, well, I will show you a picture right now of myself in mirror. As you can see, I'm wearing a t-shirt of the Kotlin 1.4 release dates. It was planned in the beginning of the year 2020, and the release slipped for almost 5 months. So it became very hard to add new features in a predictable way, because we are targeting not only the JVM, but also other platforms like WebAssembly, native platforms, and so on. And also with a huge goal in mind, keeping the interoperability with Java, the language, the complex system that is outside of our control. And the architect of the language said that this was the most challenging part in the whole project. So that's the reason.
Anton, yeah,
Yes.
we got a very good question from our guests. So you've shown very good practices and features of Kotlin, but where are these best practices documented?
Okay. That's a great question, by the way. So there is, I would like to say that there is a single place where you can find all the best practices ever, but it's not true. Because it's very subjective in many ways. So what we provide is a documentation. So documentation is constantly updated with our new ideas, understanding of the ecosystem, and our suggestions. Let's say so. There is a page called Idiomatic Kotlin or Kotlin idioms in the official documentation. And we have been presenting at the conferences about on this subject as well. There is a style guide, Kotlin style guide. That's a separate document. It's mostly related to how you format your programs. And a few books that I have been reading, and you have mentioned, I have been writing an introduction for the Kotlin design patterns and best practices book. uh, I think it's a great book in this regards, where the author, yes, that's the one. I think it's a great book where the author put the additional effort into discussing what's good and what's better. I hope it was an exhaustive answer. All right, so let's move on. And to tackle this technical debt, the team decided that, well, it's time to start rewriting the compiler. I will not be talking the whole story, how the team was rewriting it and what were the decision made, and so on. But just take it as granted, we had to develop a new compiler almost from scratch to accommodate our requirements for targeting multiple different platforms and other constraints in mind. Plus, well, we had to keep the compatibility with everything else. So what happened there? As I said, K1 was a prototype. K1, well, because we had K2 as a code name, we decided to come up with backwards compatible schema for the old compiler name. So we called it K1. It's not official, actually. But the whole thing that I was talking about here right now is boils down to these things that, well, a lot of language features were added ad hoc, and it became hard to maintain the compiler. And well, the IDE, the way you work in the IDE, the way you write code, actually imposes additional requirements on performance. So, for instance, if you are editing a little snippet of code, it would be better to check that snippet of code, not to rebuild the whole program, right? So we wanted a more granular control over the places that we verify with the compiler when you write code. So it's a different use case compared to just building the program. And compilation time performance, well, you just cannot be satisfied with the performance like ever. You always want faster. Plus this additional requirement that while we were developing this new compiler, the ecosystem was growing rapidly. Kotlin became the official programming language in Android, and a lot of applications were written. So we had to do this replacement this way that we wouldn't break much, and the or the damage would be either controlled or minimal. Plus giving some extra to the users to switch. The compilation speed is the only thing we could actually promise. So the outcome of this was that Kotlin Tutorial was coming with 80 new features. We can call them features, but they didn't change the language. They improved the language. And I need to give you a little bit of description what the compiler looks like. So there, like in 10,000 miles view on the compiler, there is a front end, which basically is a parser that parses your program, and there is a backend which generates the target bytecode. Either it's a native code or JavaScript files or something else. So in this case, we are interested in Kotlin for the JVM. That's it compiles to the classes, to the JVM bytecode, but there are many different backends, and the compiler architecture was designed so that we could plug the new backends targeting new platforms in an easier way, so to ensure the maintainability of the whole ecosystem. And the front end, as you can see, I'm expanding this thing, consists also of two stages. There's parser that looks at your program, creates a data structure that we call FIR, which stands for front-end intermediate representation. And then there is an analyzer that checks the program for various things. So for instance, it can analyze data flow, it can check how the variables are used, are they null or not, and so on. And some of the language features that we have in the language depend on that. So let me give you a brief understanding of what this front-end intermediate representation is. For instance, when the parser looks at your program, looks at your statements, it will actually transform your statements into this new data structure that represents a more generic way of the for analyzing it. Like it's like abstract syntax tree, but with an additional information about the variables, about the types, and so on. And in some places, it will convert the existing statements in something more generic, so that, for instance, if expression will be transformed into the when expression, because it's a more generic form of the same language feature of the same syntax, or it will transform the for loop into an while loop with an iterator, and the destructuring statement could be rewritten in this kind of way. We often say it's desugaring phase, right? So there is a lot of syntactic sugar in the language, and we are desugaring it in a more generic forms for the analyzer to consume. Basically, this results in a few things. For instance, we fixed a few issues in the language that I would like to demonstrate here. Imagine this function. It takes a list of longs into the as a parameter, and then we want to mutate the first element of that list. So we access the first element, and we want to add 1, so increment it. That's totally fine. We add integer to a long. That's fine. But when we try to write the same statement in a slightly different manner using plus assign operator, this doesn't work. And the compiler, the previous compiler didn't have enough attributes and information about those little variables and operators to ensure that this would work. So to fix this, you would have to write it either the old way, or you have to append the capital L letter to this one literal. Then it would work. So you would add long to a long. But desugaring helps with that. Like when we desugar this structure into this intermediate representation, then analyzer can actually say, "Oh, that's fine." Then we can actually add the integer to a long, and that's okay. So this was fixed. Let me skip the other example, which is pretty much the same but slightly more complex. The outcome is the same. Thanks to desugaring of the statements, we can fix some of the issues in the language and make it more coherent. But the result of this was that the compiler got a better and more powerful data flow or control flow engine, which resulted in improving the smartcasts. Smartcasts is this little feature in the language. There is a question, I guess.
Yes, we got a next very good question, namely, When programming, are those results from optimizations and compiler feature improvements, are they somehow proposed as suggestions for improvements in your EDE, for example, in IntelliJ?
Great answer, great question. The short answer for this is yes. The longer answer for this is whenever it makes sense, and whenever we thought that it makes sense. Because in some places it doesn't really make sense to force you to rewrite an if expression into a while or into a when expression. It's just a style. You can use it do it yourself, but it doesn't matter that it doesn't mean that you should, right? So whenever it makes sense, the IDE will suggest to do the transformation, and Alt Enter, and you're gonna transform it, or it's gonna transform it for you. So let's talk a little bit about the smart casts. So imagine you have this class cat. It has a function, and there is an instance check in the pet animal function that takes the most generic type as a parameter, um, the any type, which is kind of the analog for object in Java. So there is an instance check, and we check if the animal is a cat, and then you see this animal variable got highlighted in greenish background. This means that the smartcast worked, and this worked in the first version as well. So whenever we know that the variable, is not null or it's of some type, further on, by analyzing the data flow, we can use it without casting, just invoking those functions that exist. Otherwise, the poor function would not exist on any type, right? But if we extracted this variable, this check, into a variable, the variable didn't carry this semantic information in Kotlin 1.x prior to the row, and therefore the smartcast didn't work, and then we couldn't just invoke this function. We should have casted the animal variable to the specific type, to a cat. So the instance check did not take the effect. But because of the desugaring and the rewrite of the compiler, and now we have this analysis engine, this was just fixed into the row, and it just works. And it opened more cases for us in a more complex situations. For instance, here, as you can see, we have this condition on the first statement in the function find holder, where we check for the card first, like if the card is a card, it's an instance of check basically, and then there is a logical condition for the null value, right? Is null or empty. If I had an ID, I would navigate to that function because it's an interesting one. How can you check if a value is null using a function? That kind of is strange, because logically it should throw a null pointer exception when you invoke something in it. But it's a special function that is declared on a nullable type. So I don't have the definition on the slides. You can check in the standard library. It's a very interesting implementation. So you see, there's an insta check. We are smart casting the card variable to a card type, and then the nullability check using the function results in a smart cast later on in when you use this value. So basically, for 2.0, that was it. That wasn't much. We just introduced new compiler architecture. We improved the compilation speed. I would not show you the benchmarks because it's very hard to collect the data. But additionally to the whole this rewrite, and we kept all the correctness of the compiler, we were able to fix some of the shortcomings of the existing features and make them more powerful. So there is a question about WebAssembly support.
Exactly.
Is there an update for WebAssembly support?
Do you know about that?
Let me- That's a great question as well. The team is actively working on WebAssembly support, and WebAssembly support means two things: WebAssembly in the browser and WebAssembly on the server. And in the browser, it's pretty nice already. We can compile big programs to WebAssembly to be rendered in the browser, and compose multi-platform is this framework that you know from Android development, but ported to multiple platforms by JetBrains. Now can be run in WebAssembly runtime, thanks to the new specs being implemented in all the browsers for WebAssembly garbage collection support. On the server side, I think the recent state was mostly behind waiting for the runtimes to support the new specs, the WebAssembly GC, and that's it. I hope that by the time of Kotlin 2.2 and Kotlin Conf in May this year, you will actually hear a lot of new interesting updates on this. All right. So what does future promises to us? What's next for Kotlin after 2.0? Let me give you a quick glimpse and what happened in 2.1. I will not list all the minor feature updates, but just a little bit, and I will actually dive into some visionary features. So there is a few guards and the improvements for pattern matching capabilities in Kotlin that I mentioned before was delivered in 2.1. Other features that are listed here for improving the language and making it even more safer are coming in 2.2 or the updates to 2.2. And of course, it's not like coming as a stable feature. We always first experiment. We check for the feedback. We then proceed upgrading the feature into alpha status, port it to different platforms, and so on. So there's the uh, maturity process for every feature in the language. And I hope I will have time to talk about the very, very experimental stuff as well at the end, because it's interesting, but it's so visionary. It doesn't have a syntax yet. Let's see. So there is a
Anton,
question.
we got the next question.
Perfect.
Is there any work being done to utilize virtual threads in coroutines?
I wish I could answer that definitely, but I haven't seen any updates regarding that. Technically, you can just run virtual or coroutines on top of a virtual executor. Uh, create it as a like the virtual thread executor pool, and use it as a dispatcher for the coroutines. Technically, it's possible. It's just not out of the box. You have to write a couple of statements. That's it. All right. So the guards, or the let's say the analog for the pattern matching. Here's a sample code where, like in the application, Kotlin is an application programming language, so we write applications with that, and that's a totally familiar business logic code to you, I think. We are getting an order from somewhere, and this order might be of a different type. It might be a yearly subscription, monthly, or a one-time order, and then we do something with that. And there is a condition: if the yearly subscription amount is greater than 100, then apply discount. The problem here is that it's a little bit too verbose, so there is some repetition in the beginning, not so nice, and potentially it's actually a logical error as well. What happens if it's a yearly subscription but the amount is less than 100? You see, we didn't cover all the cases. So what could we do here is, well, we should first of all, of course, cover all the cases, and this check for the amount that is greater than 100 is a special case in this regard. And to ensure that the compiler will actually help us, it's better to use the when expression with a subject. So this is a similar construct that we have in Java for switch, right? The switch expression. But in this case, as you can see, there is a compilation error where this logical check is happening. And this is where the guard expressions come in. So in this place, it actually expects an arrow, but this new spec that we developed, there were a lot of discussions how it should be implemented, what kind of operator or a keyword should there be. I will not dive into those details. We just had a live stream on our YouTube channel in the end of the year, the day of the release, and the language designers explained all the special cases of why it's implemented like this, so I don't want to repeat. But well, you see there's like an additional condition for this type check, which we call guarded conditions or guard expressions. The thing here is that this whole construct depends on the order. So if we place the most common condition on the top, you see that the other one with the logical condition with the guard expression is not reachable, and the compiler will tell you about that, of course. So that's the correct way of writing it. Since 2.1, it's not a stable feature yet. You still have to enable with the compiler argument, but you're free to use it, and we want to monitor how people use it and if it actually helps the developers writing better programs. Well, remember we talked about the destructuring and pattern matching, and here's where the three features: the when expression, the exhaustive when expression, the guarded guard conditions, and the structuring of the objects in Kotlin come together to form something very similar to pattern matching in Java. So the pattern itself is not in the expression where the type check is happening, but rather on a separate line inside the block of code that is executed. It's nice. I mean, not exactly as powerful as in Java currently, but it's a good alternative. However, it has a little problem. As you can see, the ID, name, and amount, those are arbitrary names. They might not be matching whatever properties your object is declaring. So for instance, I could pass a real instance and print it out and get order 1 Anton, 12. But if I switch the order of those variables, we are not checking for the names, and it's positional. So whatever position you are declaring it at, it will get the value according to the position of the field or property inside this object, and therefore we might get a very strange result, like order Anton. Anton becomes the ID for like that we declared instead of the ID that we anticipated. So it's not nice. It's easy to make a logical error when you transform your program. So it's easy to write, but it's also a source of errors, of logical errors, and therefore we are looking to make this situation incorrect or invalid in some of the upcoming releases, and it has to be name based. So the name should match the property. How it will be implemented, it's the other question. We don't have a prototype yet, and but I just want to share our plans here. So we looked at the guards and we looked at the destructuring. Another feature that is in the works on the for the designers is the union types for errors, and this is something very interesting. So let me explain a little bit with this example here. Finding a last element in a collection or in a sequence by a predicate. How could we implement this function? So the naive way would be to implement it like this. We implement a high-level function for the sequence or for the collection, whatever we want. It takes a predicate as an argument, and then we just iterate over this collection. And if you find an element, then nice, it's a result. If you don't find it, we throw an exception. And very straightforward and naive. The problem is if we want to search for a predicate that checks for a null, like we want to find the last element that is null. And there we couldn't distinguish, our previous implementation could not distinguish if we just did not find this element or we found this element and it is null. So to adjust to this use case, the implementation becomes pretty complex, and we have to introduce some unchecked cast at the end to look for the most generic type in the beginning and so on. Not nice. So the better way here would be to have like a marker object that represents the state that we didn't find an element, and then we iterate over the collection, and if we didn't find it, well, the result of this function would indicate that, right? So we distinguish between null and the state that we didn't find anything. But there are some problems. We have to declare the result here as the most generic type, like the any, and it has to be nullable, and there is an unchecked cast at the end. So it is kind of ugly. It kind of shows that something is not completely right with the type system here. We could probably do better. So there is an idea that it would be possible to extend the type system in such a way that the variable could be declared as a union type with the expected result type plus some indication of the invalid state. Like, for instance, we didn't find an element in the collection. That's an error. And here, as you can see, we can leverage smart casts again. So thanks to this new control flow engine, smart casts become like a very convenient language feature that supports the new developments. That's an idea. Another cool idea is context parameters, and that feature exists for a while in the experimental state, and we are developing it further, reiterating on top of that. So there will be distinct type for a null value.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you, Anton. It was
Yes,
a
no.
very interesting deep dive into type system. Yes, but now we have so there will be distinct type for null value.
Like the not that there will be existing type for a null value, there will be a way for you to model an invalid state on the type system level. There are a few other interesting ideas behind this development. Like you probably, if you have tried Kotlin, you probably know that Kotlin doesn't have a feature called checked exceptions. And in a way, I'm missing that. I do love check exceptions, but the problem with checked exceptions in Java is that everybody hates them for inconvenience. They are coloring the functions. They impose nesting on the subsequent invocation of such functions and so on. And in other languages like Swift, for instance, the checked exceptions also exist, but they provide some extra language capabilities by allowing to tie or to bind the
Wow.
function result to some specific optional type. And this is kind of what we are aiming at. Not exactly the same way, more like on a type system level. That, well, you can get something that is invalid from this function, and that signals to you that you have to handle this situation, right, without those try catch blocks, nesting and so on when you write complicated logic.
Well, that's great. And we have already next great question. Is it practical to use Kotlin to write a compiler on your own? That uses, for example, Gen AI for code generation. And does Kotlin let you call, yeah, LLVM and
Okay,
C++
okay.
libraries from
Let's answer this
directly?
question in chunks. Is it practical to use Kotlin to write a compiler? Yes, because Kotlin compiler is written in Kotlin. Um, if it uses LLVM for code generation, yes, because Kotlin compiler generates LLVM for code generation. That's how Kotlin native is implemented. Uh, does it allow calling C or C++ libraries generally? There is C interoperability feature in Kotlin native, not C++ interoperability. That's a very complex thing. I'd like to stay short with this answer. Yeah. So let's quickly look at the other two features. They are very complicated, and I hope I will unfold them the best way I could. So context parameters, and for this I have to explain a little bit or what the feature that is called type safe builders in Kotlin is. They are often referred as DSLs, domain specific languages. If you go to the documentation, they are called type safe builders. Uh, this idea comes from Groovy language, but in Groovy they were dynamic and relying on the dynamic dispatch. In Kotlin they are statically checked, and it's just a combination of a few language features like using the extension functions, extension literals, lambda, trailing lambdas as parameters, and some default values as well. And when you combine them together, it becomes a nice construct, a nice practice for building graphs of objects, let's say. So I do have a few presentations on that as well. You can find them on YouTube, and I have been presenting that on Devox UK probably a couple of years back. So imagine we are writing a library that builds client objects. That's separated. We have a client class. It comes from that library, and the library provides an API for that as well. And the call site where we are using this library looks like this. We're invoking this build client function and assigning some attributes inside the block that we provide as an argument. It looks nice, but not so nice because the local date off looks kind of ugly. We have this nice DSL there, and we have this ugly API call. We could probably do better. And better would be providing some extra DSL on top of the date objects, let's say. And then on the call side, it looks nicer. The 10th of March 2000, like year 2000, for instance, right? Looks pretty fancy. The problem here is that we cannot control the scope of how this function is used. It's gonna leak outside the block. It's gonna be visible for all the integers that you use in your program. Um, and it's just not nice. We should do better. There's a follow-up question on the union types for errors. Is it the main use case of union types to implement either. Here, I wish I could say yes in my understanding of this feature, but it might not be exactly what the language designers are looking for. Right? It might be like a special case, and the feature will cover more use cases. So I don't have a definite answer to your question right now, but the short answer is yes. The not so short answer is you have to ask the language designers there. I'm not so well informed about this. So let's go back to this library part. So we need to restrict the scope for this extension function that the library declares, or we as a library provider declare in our code. What we could do is to say that this march function, the extension function for a global type such as integer, is only available or visible in a specific context. So if the user uses our function somewhere where this context is present. But the problem here is we cannot expect that the user will know that they need to declare the context. That's just not cool. We are providing the API. We just have to guide the users of our library and our API to write correct code without hitting the wall of compiler errors. What we could do here is to say that the parameter that our function takes, the lambda, the block of code, is that context. So on the library side, without forcing the user to think about the context, we just say that the block of code that you pass to this function will be executed in that context. And well, we kind of separate this from the user, right? And then we, as a library author, are responsible for providing this context. We have control over that. And this way, whatever happens inside the block will have the context, and the march function will be visible inside the block, but it will not be visible outside the block. You will not be able to misuse that function without the provided context. That's a great feature. And the last one, very last one, we are kind of over time already, and I hope you're having fun. But the last one that I want to talk about is the effect system capabilities. This is something that is not targeted to any release yet, but it's and there is no syntax. But I want to tell you the idea. So there are contracts. You probably have heard of contracts. That's an internal feature in Kotlin that is only used in the standard library. You are not using that usually as a Kotlin developer when you write programs in Kotlin, but we can use contracts for something very interesting. So back to our example with this DSL. We solved the problem of constraining the scope for the extension function that we added to an integer type, but is it okay? Probably not completely. What if we forget to assign some property? What if our DSL kind of assumes that you should assign all the properties inside this block, right? Maybe we are configuring some connection to the database in that block, or we need to assign the password, the URL, the username, and so on, and we forget to do that. So this kind of validations on the compilation in the compilation time would actually make our programs better and safer. So the feature does not exist for this, and it's very experimental. There is no syntax, no real syntax, but as I said, I want to show you the idea what could be done. So when we declare this function again, the build client, there is an existing feature called contracts, and it has its own syntax. The problem with contracts is the syntax itself, because it's specified inside the body of the function, but the contract may affect the signature or the parameter and so on. And here I'm trying to express something that doesn't exist in an existing syntax. You see, like the contract block, we say that at least once we should call it in the init block. The init is the parameter name to that function. So inside that block, the name assignment should happen at least once, right? And if it doesn't happen, then it's a compilation error. So this way, we can control or require something to happen inside the block of code that otherwise wouldn't be checked. And this is also like a great addition to the language that helps the library authors to guide how the how the um, how the users of those libraries should be using those DSLs, and probably even I'm just making this up on the spot right now. Maybe the tooling can automatically help the users of those APIs to write code. You see, like if there is a requirement by the compiler, by checking this requirement, we can generate code for you just as you type. That's a great feature. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. I hope you got some ideas what is happening to Kotlin and where it's heading. We do have a lot of things and features and ideas on our plate, especially with the appearance of K2, the new compiler that helps us to deliver the new features in a more sustainable pace. So there's a lot of new features coming, and we are looking into making the language more safer with the new abstractions. And of course, one of the themes that we are seeing across many different languages in Java as well is this data-oriented programming where you work with data, and then you better have convenient tools in the language to work with such tasks. I have those slides uploaded on the speaker deck already. You can follow me on Twitter. You can check some of my demos on GitHub, and come to our YouTube channel as well to check for the latest and greatest in Kotlin. Thank you. I guess we have more questions on the list, and we could probably answer those. Any plans to offer OpenRewrite recipes to migrate to Kotlin 2.x? Great question. I don't know about the plans, but since OpenRewrite exists as an open source project, I anticipate that passionate community members, as they are, would contribute these kind of recipes to OpenRewrite as well. The OpenRewrite, it's a name, right? It's open. So for Java 11, 17, 21, this is great. Totally agree. Would like to see that as well. But the engineers on the team are busy with the language and the compiler and all the other support in our tooling. I hope we had infinite resources to contribute to other open source projects as well. Well, we cannot have all the nice things in the world.
Awesome. We have another question. Oh, you got to it already from Jeremy. Yeah. I'll let you answer that one, Anton.
Union types were marked for Kotlin 2.x does not mean some undermined version after to correct. So the short answer is correct. There is a UTrack ticket with this long discussion already and a lot of interesting details. I hope to see the detailed keep the Kotlin enhancement proposal for this feature when we can start talking about this in more details with maybe some early prototype of the compiler, so we could actually show some real code with that. but the language team is working on that right now. So it's
lots of work to do.
Not something I can just pull out and show you right now. And therefore, since we don't have that and we don't have any initial feedback on how the feature feels, we cannot promise the exact language update when it will be delivered. Right.
Awesome. We have two more questions for you. One from Anthony. He wants to know if there's any ideas of what happens when a contract fails. Is it a compiler time error that will be highlighted in idea, or make like assertions?
Exactly. Like, great question. The whole point of the contracts is to provide the compile time information. So our goal is to shift as many issues that you might have in the code into the compiler phase, right? Runtime errors are bad.
Agreed. And I think a great one to end the show from Dimitri. He would like to know, is there any sort of like fun Pac-Man-y style things that maybe a 10-year-old could play with to get them excited and have the joy of the programming?
I see. Like, great question. How to start with programming in Kotlin for 10 years old, and they tend to abandon things that are boring, and like I haven't seen a book teaching Kotlin through games. Maybe it's time to write one. The most exciting one for me was one recent book about the visualizing algorithms, but this is a content that is not for 10 years old. I think. Yeah, great idea. I cannot suggest anything right now from the top of my head. We gotta work on that.
Well, if anyone's watching and knows of any great books, please pop them in the chat. I'm sure all the other listeners, as well as Anton and Irina, would love to know about them.
Right.
Amazing. Well, no, Irina, we'll bring you back on. I wanted to say a huge thank you to both of you for such an awesome session. Amazing hosting, amazing speaking, stopping and answering questions as you go. It was awesome, and it was really great to have you both here. For anyone still listening, we are going to be doing the raffles for some of the tickets soon. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you to both these lovely speakers, and hopefully we'll have them back on VJug very, very soon. But thank you so much. Right. Oops. Sorry, Irina. Everyone else that is still here, just a few little housekeeping notes before we jump into the moment of truth of winning some tickets. I want to let you know about our next session. So our next session will be on the 20th of February. It'll be the same time, the same place. If anyone is watching on YouTube and doesn't have a YouTube channel account and so was unable to use the chat, we also live stream on LinkedIn where you can chat there as well. So if anyone watching on YouTube that wasn't able to chat because they didn't have a channel account, you can go to LinkedIn and ask questions there, and they'll come through just the same and we can answer them. On the 20th of February, we'll be joined by Eric Diendry. He's a Java champion and senior principal developer advocate at Red Hat, and he's going to be covering how to avoid common pitfalls with modern microservices testing. So don't miss that one. You can head on to our meetup.com page to find out more and sign up for that, as well as you can sign up on LinkedIn. But the moment of truth, for anyone who would like to win one of 3 tickets to DevNexus in Atlanta, I want you to pop hashtag DevNexus into the chat now. That's how you enter, and we're going to do a live draw. So if you'd like to enter a draw to win an instant ticket to DevNexus in Atlanta in March, I think, very, very soon, pop hashtag DevNexus in the chat. Amazing. Well, while we enter that draw, we also have some awesome other things up for grabs. So we heard a lot about DevOps UK. It's an awesome event. As I said, it's the people that help us. We're a community-driven thing, and there's lots of things to pay for and do and run, and without them, we couldn't actually run as a community. So we're very proud to be their partners. They're running on the 7th and 9th of May in London. And as a VJug member, you can get yourself £75 off your ticket. So if you use this code that I am showing on screen now, when you check out, you can get £75 off your ticket. So use that code. And again, if you want to enter the DevNexus competition, please put hashtag DevNexus in the chat. Before we draw that, we also have one more perk. The awesome community behind JCon Europe. They're, I think, the week after DevOps UK, and they are offering a selected amount of free tickets to their conference. Now, the tickets are valued at €699. So if you use this URL on screen right now and go to checkout, you can get a Jug member ticket for absolutely free, but stocks are limited. So once they run out, they run out. They do have quite a few, but obviously they do run out pretty quickly. So if you would like to grab yourself a free ticket to JCon, that is the URL you should be using. Now, I'm going to give all of you a little bit more time to get your entries in for the DevNexus competition. I know there is a slight delay between me talking and you hearing this, but get your entries in and we will do a live draw. And let's get that ready. Now, don't worry if you don't win a DevNexus ticket today. We also have a discount code for them, but get your codes in, get your entries in ASAP. And let's bring up the awesome. We have 5 entries. Let's wait a little bit longer. At the moment, you've almost got a 1 in 3 chance of winning. Remember that it does need to be hashtag DevNexus to enter. This is my elevator music. I'm going to give us all an extra 30 seconds to get in on the action. Let's also bring Irina and Anton back up and let's chat a little bit. Now, Anton, you said that you actually gave a talk at DevOps UK a few years ago, last year. Yeah. How did you find the event? Do you think it's worth attending? Should people use the discount code?
I love it. I love it. I love coming to London in May. It's pleasant weather. Everybody's saying that, oh, London is raining all the time. No. Like 2 times I've been there, it was always sunny. It was at the time of DevOps. So
it's crazy. It's always been a good weather on DevOps. I feel like, touch wood, it's always been a good week. So yeah, if you are almost guaranteed good weather, come to the UK in May, and you can meet me and Kim, the other VJug organizer. Irina, you've also been to the event, right?
Yeah. I was last year. I attended to DevOps in UK in May, and it was great and amazing. I can definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Nice. And have either of you been to DevNexus or JCon?
JCon, I will be there. You can find me on a Karakun stand, so we will present a camp. And yes, I hope also to join DevOps in this year.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to run the draw now for the 50 odd of you that are still watching. It must mean that you don't win free tickets, but the 5 entries that we do have, I'm going to run the draw. So let's see who will be winning our tickets. So our first winner for a DevNexus ticket is, drumroll please, hey, Jeremiah Orr. congratulations. You are going to Dev Nexus. If you'd like to redeem your prize, as I said, jump into the VJug Slack and you can message me, Sam Hepburn. You'll find me there, and I will give you all the details you need to know about how to redeem your prize. But as I said, we've got 2 more tickets, so let's draw again. Who is our next winner? Winner number 2 is, again, drum roll please. Oh, Bruce, you're also going to Dev Nexus. Congratulations. Maybe you and Jeremiah can meet up as winners. They've got, Dev Nexus is one of my favorite for all the fun activities they do around the event as well. They really think about community, and they do a lot of like parties and dinners and get-togethers and music and stuff. So maybe you guys can meet there. And last but not least, I won't keep the rest of you waiting. We have 1 more ticket to go. And the final ticket will be for Marcus. Amazing. Congratulations,
Amazing.
Marcus.
Congratulations.
For anyone who didn't win, if you weren't one of those 3 lovely humans, we do have a 40% off discount code. So if you use that code, I left in the markdown. So there's no close brackets at the end. There's no square thing at the end. It ends on jugs. You can use that code to get yourself 40% off. So as I said, DevOps UK gets you £75. JCon gets you a free ticket, but stocks are limited, and DevNexus gets you 40% off. If anyone has any fun things for us to raffle off at future events, software, tickets, anything fun, please reach out. We'd love to share it with our community. But again, a huge thank you to our hosts and our speaker, Irina and Anton. We absolutely loved having you on the show today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. And for everyone in the chat, we hope to see you here again soon as well. But have a lovely evening, day, morning, lunchtime, wherever you are in the world. Goodbye.
Thank you for the fantastic session. Goodbye.
Bye.